monument to the courage and faith of the unscorned American. Buffalo Hunter, who with his great show may show well. On these broken streets and thundering roads.
Hi, I want to welcome you to the History Show. My name is Matt Scott, and this is a continuing series of which we're doing oral histories with, right now, with American U.S. veterans. And we're interviewing both veterans from World War II, the Korean War, and from the Vietnam War. And we're really fortunate today to have David McAllister, who some of you in Chelmsford might know as the owner of Triangle Auto.
Triangle Service Center.
Service Center, I'm sorry. And where actually you'd serviced my car and did a great job before.
Thank you, thank you.
And I guess one of the interesting things about this, and this is also a project that we're going to be sending these tapes to the Library of Congress, where they will be archived and kept as part of the oral history project, which I think is a great thing because, number one, it's history, and number two, it's history by people who actually were there and experienced and saw a lot of this firsthand. And I think one of the really neat things about it is that if you imagine maybe somebody 400 or 500 years from now might be doing a story on what was going on in the United States and the world, they'll be able to find these on DVDs or whatever kind of format they're transferred to eventually. And it's kind of like you'd be able to get a live oral history from some of the guys serving with George Washington or the Roman armies in ancient Rome. I mean, it's if you think of it hundreds of years from now and stuff, it's going to be kind of incredible. And a lot of these people, a lot of these veterans in particular and stuff, have incredible stories to tell. And you might see David down at the Triangle Service Center and stuff. And but there's a lot that he has been through and a lot of experiences that he's had that most of us would find probably unimaginable. Now, Dave, first, thank you for coming in and submitting yourself to this, but hopefully you'll enjoy it.
And I appreciate being here. As you said, it's almost a responsibility for anyone who has seen any type of combat or seen any aspect of war to pass it on, because it's pretty important for future generations
Absolutely.
to know. It's not something anybody really wants.
Absolutely. And I have a particular interest in Southeast Asia, having done several different documentaries there and been there a number of times myself. Not back during the Vietnam War, but after that. And I guess first, you grew up in Carlisle. Mm-hmm. And you graduated from high school in?
Concord Carlisle High in 1966.
In 1966.
Mm-hmm.
And and when did you join up?
Then I went to UMass. I went to Stockbridge School of Agriculture for 2 years and majored in animal husbandry.
Uh-huh.
And as soon as I graduated and lost that 2S deferment, it didn't take long.
Okay, so you were drafted into the United States Army.
Correct.
And this was in 1960?
Actually, draft notice came in late 68, right around Christmas. Okay. And January 13th of 69, I was on my way.
Really?
To training.
And this was, I mean, basically, I don't want to get, go back to this and stuff, but this was also kind of a period of a lot of craziness in the United States. There were war demonstrations.
A lot of unrest. A lot of buses going to Canada.
A lot of buses going to Canada, and just all sorts of different things. That was it was probably the peak of the craziness and stuff. And
we'd been hurt badly in Tet of 68.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of replacements needed, and that's what we fell into, that replacing the damage that was done in 68. Although we did more damage to the other side, supposedly, we still had some numbers to replace. So there was still quite a bit of buildup. It was at its height.
Now, at this point, we don't have the draft anymore. So what happened when you're even drafted there? I mean, you get a notice and you go...
I get there. got that asked just the other day, and the younger person couldn't believe that that could be possible. Basically, I got it. I got out of school in June, and got my notice December 17th, I think, that I was going to be called, and had to do some physicals, etc., for it. And then January 13th, I was on the bus down to Fort Gordon, Georgia, for basic training. Followed by then going to Fort Polk, Louisiana for advanced infantry training, and three-week leave, and then I was over in mid-June, so it was about 6 months from training to jungle.
That was now basic training in Georgia. What was that? Basically, I mean, you get there. What was that like there?
It's certainly
Was this a
different.
shock to the system?
It certainly is. You know, going into it, you have to remember that so many others have gone before you that you're not being singled out. But of course, to impart the type of military discipline that's needed on large numbers, they have to so-called break you down. You know, to bring you up, to then bring you up to let you know that you are something more than just something slithering around in the red Georgia clay, you know,
now,
which we did a lot of.
And plus, you had some college, so you were probably a little bit maybe better educated than, or not really?
Yeah, actually the draft, you know, unless you were in college, it really didn't matter. But there were a lot of people that were in for various reasons. At that time, if you were a bit of a bad actor, the judge might say, you know, off to jail or off to Vietnam.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there was a mix. It was a good mix. As far as what we did in basic training, just mostly discipline, running, physical, breaking down weapons, knowing the nomenclatures, you know, and how the rank system worked.
How long was basic training?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. And what month had you gone off there again?
In January.
In January.
So then it was off to Fort Polk, Louisiana, which was the infantry training, jungle warfare, so to speak, given the swamps, et cetera, that were, you know, we worked in down there.
Did everybody from who was basically in your basic training platoon?
96, 97% at that time.
Yeah. And so you were basically just going in for infantry training. Had there been any possibility of going into some of the other subspecialties or anything?
Well, at that time, no. Although once we got to AIT, of course, they're always giving you battery of tests, and they figured that I should have been a helicopter pilot.
Yeah.
I guess so. They called you out in rank and moved you to another area, and I was feeling, you know, fairly pleased. That beats walking around downstairs. You know, you can fly above it, and it's
Right.
cooler up there too. And they start the assembly, and the guy at the podium says, "You, what are you doing here?" And I'm looking around. Is he talking to me? And certainly he was. He says, "You don't belong here. You have glasses on." So somehow the Army's paperwork didn't pick up on corrective lenses.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do that flying helicopter, you know. So it was back to the ground.
Yeah. So Fort Polk, Louisiana?
Fort Polk, Louisiana.
Now, what part of Louisiana is that in?
Oh, boy. I don't know,
Oh,
to tell you
okay.
the truth.
But-
It's outside of Leeds,
Is it in the swamps?
Lake
or?
George, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's certainly, like I say, it was good to train in that,
Yeah.
particularly the training for night maneuvers and all. They drop you off at one point, and you had to be at another point within 24 hours.
Now, were you assigned? You were assigned to a certain platoon.
In training,
Yeah, in training.
you always did, yeah.
Right.
Squads and platoons and companies.
And you were basically, I mean, there were people from all over the country involved.
but they were all oppressed by the military rule,
Yeah.
so we were all friends. you know?
Really? Okay. And had you traveled around the country at all much at that point? I mean, Louisiana can seem like a different country to some
Yeah,
people.
not really. I'd been down in Florida.
Yeah.
You know, so I saw some pretty good rains down there. Louisiana, I never saw, even in Vietnam, I never saw it rain as hard as in
Oh, really?
Louisiana. Yeah.
So what did the training kind of, I mean, what kind of stuff were you going through at that point?
Navigation, how to recognize targets, realizing that if a target moves slow, the human eye didn't pick it up, so don't make any sharp movements, you know, abrupt movements. And that was good training. They'd have cadre down in the woods behind trees, and you'd have to score if you saw them or not, you know, raise a type of card. And then night maneuvering. That was, like I say, it was very good because you then realized, you know, you're not just walking down to the store for a Coke here. You're trying to get, you have to go through an area. There's no going around it. You can't take the high road, so to speak. So you'd cross and you'd come in contact with the leeches and the snakes and, you know, all the stuff that you didn't want to do. And of course you'd be wet and miserable. And so it was good training, yes.
Yeah. How long did that take? How long
That
were
was
you-
8 weeks also.
That was 8 weeks. And at that point, I guess most of the people there were all going to be going to Vietnam?
Absolutely.
Is that why you were there?
Unless they would be kept on if they needed training, people or cadre. Sometimes they would, if they had a need in a certain field or specialty, they might keep someone who did extremely well in that specialty. But again, it was probably 95% were on the plane in 3 weeks.
And what was the morale among the, you know, soldiers and stuff that you were assigned with? I mean,
It was good. No, it was good. It wasn't, of course, we were young.
Yeah.
And everyone was there for a good time, even though it wasn't a good time.
sure.
You know?
So after you completed that training there, was there a break between the end of that and being shipped off to Southeast Asia?
3 weeks.
There was 3-week break.
Yeah, which was actually nice. I find out in talking to Second World War guys, they had no break from training. They went from Fort Devens by train or truck right down to, I think they shipped out of New York, if I'm not mistaken, to go over.
So what'd you do for that 3 weeks? You come back home?
I don't even remember. I'm sure I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure I did. I know I'd put on 35 pounds.
In 3 weeks?
No, in the
Oh.
in the 8 week in the 16 weeks that I was training.
Oh, you put on weight while you were training. Usually people lose weight during that.
Well, they have a high protein, you know, meals that
Yeah.
they feed you. They want, you know, a lot of the heavier guys come down in weight, and the skinny guys go up.
Yeah. And at that point you were probably in the best shape of your life.
I felt I was fat, but that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now the process of being shipped off, which is kind of, I mean, one of the things in World War II, people would get on a ship and they'd be at sea for, you know, sometimes 3 weeks or something. You know, they usually go over to England unless they were going out to the Pacific Theater. But you get on a jet plane
Yep.
in where?
Logan.
Logan. A military plane or a civilian?
No, civilian. I think at the time it was Braniff, I think, was in business at the
Okay.
time, and they were orange and white, I think,
Yeah.
the planes.
And they fly you to where?
Well, we went out to Oakland,
Okay.
and then processed again. Got gear that we didn't have, of course, because we were on leave.
Right.
Got gear for jungle gear, if you would. And by then we pretty much knew where we were going.
Yeah. And so from Oakland,
Oakland, it was straight over to, we stopped at Hawaii, and then we stopped at Guam or Wake Island, and I
Yeah.
should remember, but I don't. And then it was off to...
was this all
Vietnam.
on military transport?
No, they were commercial.
They were commercial.
Yeah, and the stewardesses were dressed commercially. It
Yeah.
was just like we were going on vacation, only we were all dressed in green. You know?
So from Guam you went to Vietnam,
To Vietnam, yeah.
and you land in
It was Tonsinoot Air Base, which is just outside of Saigon.
Now, do you remember coming in country? I mean, looking down through a window or anything like that?
Well, absolutely. I remember the girls or the stewardesses nicely saying goodbye to us. And,
Yeah.
you know, and coming down the plane onto the tarmac and wondering why we didn't have weapons yet. And that's all the processing in, and then really wondering as we were standing in line for the processing at the airport, why we didn't have weapons when they started to moor to the airport.
And this was a civilian plane that had come in?
Yeah,
at
but
the
it had
time?
already taken off.
It had already
by
taken
then.
off, but there
Yeah.
are...
it was just probably a 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock harassment of the
Yeah.
airport, you know?
Now, what part of the country is that?
Tonsanoot?
Yeah.
Oh, Saigon, Tonsanoot, southern.
Okay, just for...
Before you hit the lowlands of the Delta.
Yeah. Do you remember, I mean, when you got there and stuff, I mean, was the weather or anything like that a shock to the system? Just getting off. I mean, sometimes that very first impression, I mean, the smell or anything like that, you know, the odor of the country?
Yeah, there was an odor. Of course, the burning of garbage, etc., was in the air. Very moist. It was like a blast, you know, like a heat blast from a furnace. And you're not really dressed for comfort. You're not in short sleeves. We still had our long sleeve green ODs on. And sometimes they don't go for comfort over there, the military.
Now,
you know.
did you had your equipment with you at this point, or?
Basics, no. And then we went to an in-country, actually we had to go to a redeployment center, which we spent 2 or 3 days at, while they picked and chose who was needed in what division throughout the military.
So you had not yet been assigned to a division?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And that took 2 days, I think. And it was good, too, because people who were transferring through or perhaps going back home could tell us some stories and enlighten us, and it was like a new kid in school.
So what kind of stuff were you hearing?
Oh, just about what type of booby traps they were on, and there'd be an injured guy here recovering, and he'd talk about tripwires, and it was educational.
Yeah.
But then once you are assigned to the division, of which I think there are 11 Army divisions in Vietnam, or brigades, or separate units, so to speak. Once you were assigned, and we went to the 1st Infantry Division, known as the Big Red One, you do in-country training there for 6 or 7 days. Stuff that they said at the time they didn't want to show you in the States, etc. It was good, and I don't knock the school, but we had already learned it.
Yeah.
They didn't really show us anything new, but it was good to get acclimated. We were taken out into a free fire zone, a hostile area, to get some of the jitters off. And then we got assigned to, then we went from Zion, we got assigned to a battalion, which happened to be up in Lai Khe.
And what battalion was that?
2nd and 28th.
Okay.
Infantry Battalion. We got assigned to them, and they were headquartered, the brigade headquarters was out of Lai Khe at the time, which is just south of the Michelin rubber plantation. And 2 days there before they said, okay, you're going. And Ralph, who I spoke about earlier, and myself both got on the chopper, and I'll never forget, it was raining. It was muddy, so muddy, they just moved out of a night defensive perimeter and were spending the night in a roamed plow area where bulldozers would plow down the trees, etc. So it was extremely muddy.
Yeah.
And we got off the chopper amongst this platoon who was trying to get resupplied in the field, sea rations and ammo, and nobody cared we were there.
Oh.
Excuse me, where do we go?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I think you want to see such and such over there. So then we got assigned to our platoon, and then to our squad, and Ralph and I ended up in the same squad.
And you had you flown over from Massachusetts and everything? Or, had you flown out of Logan together and everything? So you guys had...
Yeah, we were through training and everything, and ended up in the jungle together.
So that's a little bit comforting to have at least.
It was, yeah. At least you had someone to look at, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
what do you do now?
Yeah.
But then it was good. I mean, it was good once we got ammo. Because you're always a little on edge.
Right.
The next morning we had to secure a culvert.
Now, when we're talking about the next morning, you had been in country how long now?
Oh
Or
gosh.
is it a little bit more than a week or something?
Yeah,
or
maybe 10 days.
maybe 10 days.
Yeah.
And so everything was still somewhat of a. I mean, you hadn't absorbed the country yet or anything like that. I mean.
No, we had no idea where we were.
Yeah.
We were on a need to know, and they didn't feel we needed to
Right.
know.
So you had to secure a culvert, which means, I mean, basically.
Just a night duty. Actually, we did that night, and the next morning well, it wasn't our first fire because we'd been mortared at the airport.
Yeah.
We were shot at going over Light K, and they blew up the ammo dump. And then we got out to the field, and the next morning we took sniper fire. And I looked at Ralph and says, boy, oh boy, are we going to make 365 days of this?
Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then it got, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks for an infantry guy to start to feel, like maybe he's at home, if you would.
Sure. Now, and I guess one of the differences between being in Vietnam and maybe some other places, though I guess it's a little bit more common now, is that there really kind of weren't like battlefields where you'd, something like World War II, where the Germans were all that way, and the Allies were, all on this side of the line, and you're going in that direction.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
you take the land, and well, most of our operations where they suspected activity, and we'd go in, and we may not ever be back in that area. We may take the area, secure the area, we may never see it again.
Now, a little bit, just to get kind of a little feel for exactly how things function there. You were assigned to a battalion, and there was like a battalion headquarters. And then you were assigned to a company. And then a platoon.
Correct.
And then also
a squad.
So usually you would probably go out as a platoon, or would you sometimes go out as a squad?
It depended on what the activity was. Generally, if we flew out, if we were air inserted, it was company size because of the opposite numbers. You didn't want to be undermanned.
Now, the home for the company, was that at the battalion headquarters? I mean, you'd always kind of go back to there after an operation?
That was what we called the fire support base. That's where our artillery stayed behind sandbags and barbed wire and security mines and had radio communication and that was battalion level. And then the companies, we had 3 companies. Delta Company stayed inside because they fired mortars with the artillery, the 105s and 155s. And so we'd have a range of about 20, 25 miles that we could work circular of throughout the jungle. Of that without running outside of our fire support. And there were a few missions we had to go further, and we had to wait while they brought the artillery around by truck.
Now, the battalion headquarters, did that have? Did they have like cafeterias? Was there a miniature hospital? Or was it something that, or were you just basically eating?
They had hot food back there.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'd get back there every 7 to 10 days.
And so you'd get back, and was there also? I don't mean like regular entertainment and stuff like that, but was this? Was it a small kind of enclosed almost community or something?
Actually, later on in the war, when the Vietnamization started to take hold, they made this night defensive perimeter, which was fairly good size, probably 25 bunkers American, 25 bunkers, outside on the perimeter of South Vietnamese Army.
Yeah.
So it was a combined NDP, or night defensive perimeter. And Was there entertainment? Yeah. They show movies. The whole place was built out of sandbags and ammo crates. You know, that the artillery rounds would come in. I mean, everything was. So there was an aid station where the medics would come back to resupply, but they were always pretty much out with the companies.
Yeah.
You know?
When you would come back to this place, I mean, you'd have some days off.
We'd have 2 nights off.
2 nights off.
I'm sorry, 1 night in, 2 days. So we could resupply, we could get our mail if we hadn't got it out in the field. And they were pretty good about bringing it out every 3 or 4 days out to the field, because they had to bring us water and sea rats.
Now, was this an isolated kind of compound? I mean, basically, did you get all your supplies through helicopters, or
Oh, you mean if the main compound?
the battalion headquarters? Okay?
Yeah,
Was
they quite often, yeah, I'd say it was probably 50-50. A lot of their stuff used to come over the road.
Oh, they did, you could come
called
over the
Highway
road.
14, which was
Yeah.
about this wide, out of Dow-Tien, which was right at the bottom lip of the Michelin. rubber plantation.
Now, you say the Michelin rubber plant, which was a huge plantation. Was that wasn't still operating, was it? Or
Areas of it were. Yeah, they were, the trees were still cut and all. We'd try not to work in it, because if there was damage to the rubber trees, if we had to call in artillery, it was $110 a rubber tree.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you were responsible to.
The United States government would have to pay the plantation owner.
Yeah.
And then I
Is
found,
that still owned by the French?
I think so, French
Yeah.
influence anyhow. And then I heard that the plantation owner would take that money and turn it over to the VC for protection.
Really?
So it sounds like New York.
Yeah. Now, I guess kind of the interesting thing about this is that, you know, your platoon or your company might be flown out by helicopters usually on some type of, I mean, you wouldn't walk out, right? It was,
Occasionally, if we were providing security in and around the area of a VC village down on the Saigon, which was probably 5 clicks away, we'd walk it down and sweep the highway at the same time. They always had us doing something. There was very little downtime. But if there was action, or if it was through, they wanted to get us out to check out an area of thick jungle, or they'd had reports, no, we'd get flown in. And it was generally company size. And then, but the company, see, we'd never had enough helicopters, so you'd fly in maybe a platoon at a time.
yeah. Was that most of the time you would go in by helicopters, or so how did that work? I mean, you know.
It was fun.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. It was fun, because it is a lot cooler up there,
Yeah.
you know, and you can just kind of lay back.
What
It was
what
always,
helicopters were you?
they were Huey Bell 1s, I
Okay.
think.
How many would
we
they
called them
hold?
slicks. It depended on the humidity, you know, the weather, how their rotor would hit the air, what type of lift they had. Generally, if you were going out on a mission, you had more ammo, you had more stuff going into the mission, so you'd do 4, maybe 5. Coming out, you could push 6 or 7, but again, that depended on the weather.
Yeah.
Because you still had to leave room for a door gunner. You know, they had the door gunners, and he had to be able to move too, you know.
And then how many helicopters would take off?
Generally, you'd fly in with 3, 4, 5. Some of the missions were fun, you know, and intelligence is great when it's correct, but, you know, it's really misleading when it's not. One of the missions, I remember, it's supposed to be a cold LZ or a green LZ, and it was nothing like it. One, we were supposedly up against a superior, larger force, so they wanted to make sure that the enemy knew that we had a lot of troops
Right.
coming in. So we'd be sitting up in the helicopters and touch down in the LZ, and then lay back, and it would take off again to bring us around for us to sit up again. So they thought a lot of troops were coming in.
Dave, listen, we finished up, but I'd like to have you back for one more time, because we just kind of touched initially on this.
Sure. Love to.
And so what we'll do is we'll wrap up, and thank you very much for being with us.
Pleasure.
War II, Rationing. And the Screen magazine, in its second issue, tried to explain to me of the uncommon American. Buffalo hunter who, with his raking up and huge wild from these broken streets.
Hi, welcome to the History Show, and this is part 2 of a program in which we are collecting the oral histories of United States veterans, and this is a project that we're working with the Chelmsford Senior Center. Allie over there is acting as kind of a producer for this, and we are going to be showing these, as you're watching right now, on Chelmsford Telemedia, and they're also going to be archived at the Library of Congress, and this is also in conjunction with the Veterans Administration. So thank you for being with us, and we have Dave McAllister here for the second part of our interview. I introduced him last time, and he's a businessman in Chelmsford, the owner of Triangle Service Center, and
Thank you.
he also was one of 8 children, so probably everybody throughout Massachusetts knows a McAllister that's somehow
Or two.
related to him. Somehow. I guess there's a lot about. And one interesting thing he told me that's a little bit off the subject is he used to work over at Great Brook Farm as a kid, which is now the Great Brook State Park, which is a great place to jog and walk around and stuff. And
It was a great place to work.
yeah. So when we had wrapped it up, you were in the First Division, and you had flown out from after basic training and some advanced jungle warfare training in Louisiana. You had 3 weeks off and taken that jet plane all the way to Vietnam.
I think they wrote a song about that,
Yeah.
didn't they?
And there you are, and a few days later you were basically out in the country, stationed with, what battalion was?
2nd and 28th.
2nd and 28th Battalion. And basically, from what I understand, part of the process works is that this is the battalion basically has a central command center, and it's almost like an island out in the country, and you have 3 companies assigned to it, and the companies go out on various missions, and you return for a couple days. A lot of times it's by helicopter. Sometimes you're hiking out out to various deployments and stuff. This is 1969?
69.
And you were there from 1969 to
1970.
1970.
Just 1 year.
1 year. And I guess one of the other situations there is that this is not a place with traditional battle lines, as up to that point we had experienced a lot of wars and stuff. I mean, it's just you don't know who or what or where.
Yeah. Hence the AO, or area of operation division, would say to our battalion, we want you to work this 50 square mile area. So then you put a fire support base in so you can support with artillery or firepower out to your companies. So you kind of be working, the correct word isn't in a circle, but sometimes it felt that way because you might not get back to an area you'd been in ever during a year.
So when you would go out to, on a deployment or something, what would, what was it, a traditional battle, or was it more kind of a search and destroy operation? I mean, how would things work? Or
Yeah, it was, I don't know how best to explain it other than we would get inserted if there was activity. Whatever the activity was, it might have been another unit in trouble. It might have been reports. It might even been the South Vietnamese Army in trouble. Or it might just be reports given the activity on Ho Chi Minh Trail, which our area was a major feeder. You know, the Ho Chi Minh Trail came down and it got very splintered where it had to, and then near the end of it, it fed out not only left back toward the Delta and back toward Cambodia, Sihanouk Trail, perhaps. Down to the right, there were 3 major feeders coming into the Saigon district, and our AO was right there, in charge of one of them, and that was through the Michelin area.
Would you experience large amounts of North Vietnamese
Generally
troops,
not,
or?
although guys who I've talked to that were over there earlier were up against larger forces, and I say larger forces, 50 and up of enemy. We were generally 20 and below. Just later in the war, the bombing had taken its effect, you know, on the trail. They got hurt in Tet the year before.
Yeah.
And they were being more cautious at the time.
Now, the other, you were also working with South Vietnamese troops.
Occasionally.
Did you? So this was not a regular operation. I mean, was this part of the process of Vietnamization, where we were trying to shift some of the responsibilities?
Exactly, and they would do that at brigade level. The colonel would be flying over, but we never worked really together. It might have been working together on the same operation, but we had our area and they had their area.
When you were taken out in a deployment, usually it would be for what, a couple nights or something?
Taken.
I mean, you're taken from your battalion headquarters.
No, we were 7 to 10 day, 7 to 10 day runs.
7 to 10. So when you would go out, you would be going out with your backpack, a sleeping bag. I mean, how much stuff would you actually have to carry out there?
We wish a sleeping bag. That's a nice thought, though.
Oh, really?
Oh, no. We'd have we'd put a poncho liner on the ground.
Okay.
And a poncho on the ground and just a piece of cloth over us.
Okay, well, here's one of the things that I have to really admire you for. I mean, having spent some time there, I would not, I mean, there's all sorts of besides mosquitoes,
termites and scorpions.
Snakes and scorpions and all these things. And so you would not really have something that you could protect yourself from the ground or anything.
No. And the monsoon over there was 3 storms in 24 hours, and they generally came at night. You'd get one about the time you were moving into your ambush site, 7 or 8 o'clock. You'd get one
7 or 8 o'clock
at night. And to be followed about 5 hours later by another one. And then just before dawn, you'd get another one. And you sometimes would get one during the day. And of course, you're laying there. You couldn't use the poncho because it reflected and you'd give away your position. They also could hear the raindrops on it. If you have 15 guys in an area and they see one poncho, that's all it takes to cost lives. So you would lay on the poncho to keep the scorpions and termites from coming up. Of course, they'd come up because of your warmth.
Right.
If you were really warm.
Yeah.
And just a cloth over you, to keep some body heat in.
Could you actually sleep?
Yeah. Well, you were humping all day, carrying your pack all day, adrenaline flowing if you were in contact. You'd always have 2 guys up at the position.
Rain would be pouring down on you while you were...
You hoped for replacements, not only for force during the day in conflict or contact, but there were more people to pull guard at night. You'd only have to pull an hour instead of an hour and 45 minutes, once a night.
Of course, now the situation where you're pulling a guard, I mean, you're just basically camped out in the woods.
You're sitting on your steel pot with your poncho liner around you.
And it's just people sleeping on the ground. I mean, there's no sandbags or anything like that around you at this point.
You're in the jungle. You're in the jungle. And the person on guard's responsibility was to not only check the area that was being surveyed at the time, but he had to be alert. But he also had to, if guys rolled over and started to snore, he'd have to creep over and shake them and tell them to to lay on their stomach, not on their back, because one snorer gives the position away.
Now, this is also before stuff like night vision goggles. And
We had a starlight scope, but they didn't work well because
Yeah.
it was so humid. It was just so humid. They'd fog up. We used them occasionally. The snipers had them, a better version of them.
so 2, 3, 4, 5 days out there, what would you, and you're just, I mean, you don't have a change of clothes or anything like that.
If generally they would try to drop in, because every 3 or 4 days they'd try to drop water in. If not, you were government property. They didn't want you getting sick, and we had halazone tablets
Yeah.
to put in our canteens if we were doing stream water or bomb crater water or something like that. So they like to get us fresh water. They like to get our mail out to us. They had to resupply us because with what we carried for ammo and supplies, etc., we only could do 3, maybe 4 days of sea rations.
Now, there would be a bunch of different squads camped in different, I mean, a company would, or, I mean, is it?
You might meet up with your company if you're on a larger operation, with your other two platoons.
But sometimes it might just be like your squad and you don't see anybody for 4, 5, 6 days.
Yeah.
And But
You'd
you're in
be
radio contact.
Exactly. You'd be in radio contact, and each night you knew your position because you'd call in artillery and you'd azimuth in your position, so you knew and battalion knew exactly where you were. Sometimes if contact was made and you had to go in support of that, that was something that we really didn't like to do. You didn't like to move at night,
But, I mean, that would be, because night there, I mean, this is away from the city and stuff, and if there's not
there's
a
nothing.
moon out there, I mean, how
There's
do
nothing.
you?
We had to move one time. Our position was compromised just as we were getting ready to settle down into the ambush site. The VC was spotted, and we didn't know if he was running to get across the room plow before helicopters might have spotted him, or whether he was running because he saw us. But we couldn't take the chance, so we had to get up and move our position 200 yards, 200 meters down. And it got hit that night. It got hit bad. We would have been toast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, during the day, while you're out in one of these deployments and stuff, I mean, what is it basically kind of walking around searching, or are you staying in one place, or how's that work?
Well, it is walking around and you're searching, and you're always attentive to, you could be walking into an ambush, which we have done, and it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
And you're just looking for activity to report back. I mean, if you can stumble upon something that intelligence doesn't know, they just got a little more intelligent.
Now, when you talk about walking into an ambush, and I've never been in an ambush. I mean, we've just seen them on TV or the movies or something like that, and they probably I don't know if they bear much relationship to reality and stuff. But what does is an ambush something where all of a sudden you're hearing, or there's rounds falling around you, or what happens?
It depends on how well armed they are. Quite often it'll start with they'll set off a mine, maybe a command detonated mine. Hopefully you haven't walked into that. Mostly they'll start off with small arms fire, and then it'll be followed by machine guns and grenades.
Are you seeing them, or is it just?
No, you very seldom see them.
Yeah.
You see the flash of the leaves, from the burst of the weapons, and you know the sound, and at night you know the traces.
And then they would be, how long would something like this last? I mean, is it?
Seems like forever. The one that I refer to, I don't know how detailed you want to get, but to answer your question, we had to get some wounded out, and then we had the medevacs were taking heavy fire, and they got 2 flights out and couldn't come back for the 3rd until they brought in Australian 500-pound bombs, bunker-penetrating bombs.
Yeah.
And so that whole sequence from the time we got, the 5th guy out was probably 2 hours. I was the fifth guy.
You were,
So I saw the Aussies come in, and it's a funny thing, it never goes the way you think it should. It never goes the way it trained. When that first shot is fired, there's just confusion. It's always confusion.
Yeah.
And that's why they train you so well, so you can rise above that confusion and just be automatic and do it. But we'd run it, for some reason the Aussies wanted purple smoke popped on the location.
Yeah.
Nobody had any purple smoke. They had green, they had yellow,
Yeah.
To mark the location. And so the battalion commander flew over in his helicopter and dropped a case of smoke.
oh, really?
Yeah, which injured one of the guys. But, yeah, so to answer your question, no, you don't often see them.
Right.
But I would say the normal firefight's about 15, 20 minutes.
And I guess really kind of one of the most actually dangerous aspects of it are the mines there. I mean, because they can. Is that true, or
We didn't run into a lot of mines.
Oh, you didn't?
No, they didn't. They wouldn't mine the jungle. There was no sense in it. It's
Sure.
too thick.
Oh,
and
I guess
stuff.
because they wouldn't.
Yeah, they would mine a lot of mines in the 4th Infantry Division down in the Delta, because they were easy to plant. And in fact, the farmers could plant them instead of planting rice. They could put a mine down.
Yeah.
And troops moving through, or along the dikes. But if there was a trail. I mean, you never followed a trail anyhow. You always walked off to the sides of it. But if there was a trail, it would have to be, just supply from the NVA or the VC moving down it. So they certainly wouldn't mind their own.
Sure. Now, did you, while you're on these various deployments and you're wandering around in both jungles and rice fields?
On the
and
missions,
sometimes
we
rural-
called them missions.
Yeah, missions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you be going into various, would there be small villages or farm towns or something? that you would-
Occasionally you'd stumble upon one that might have been a village, and it might have had even small rice paddies with it, but old, very old, probably French time, when the French were
Yeah.
there. But most of our areas are free fire zone. So, I mean, wherever we went, of course, that's where they deployed us. If anything moved, it wasn't supposed to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, we very seldom. We would see, if we were out near the Highway 14, that ran along the Saigon, in the area where our fire support base was, there was a village down there, and we used to go secure that sometimes. And so they'd like you to move in and secure it, and then the Vietnamese could come in and question the people that were in there.
Now, did you have much interaction with Vietnamese civilians at all, or much exposure to them?
Not a lot. Not a lot, but if you came out to the road to either sweep the road or to go down to the village or something like that, the young kids would come out and try to sell you Cokes and hoagies with Spam on it. And, I mean, that was a welcome treat. And I was surprised that higher up didn't forbid it, but they didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they felt that our job was something else deeper in the jungle, and there wasn't any problem, conversing with the kids out here. I've got some pictures in a book of little Oscar, stands about this tall, always smoking a cigarette. He was 13 years old. Always had a hat on, and he was probably a very good informant,
Yeah.
But he kind of ran the kids in the concessions.
Was this right? Was this where the battalion headquarters?
No, it was outside in this village that was about 5 clicks away. And we only had one problem. Would we interact with them? If we stopped in the village, they'd come out, and generally we'd, shoo them away, particularly if we had contact or something like that, and just weren't in a happy mood. But if we had an easy mission, like maybe to secure the village, that was easy. We'd get friendly with them. We'd give them sea rations and joke with them.
Right.
One time, it was the only time we had a problem. There was a tower during rice the idea was to prohibit the NVA from getting the rice. And the VC were generally the runners, you know, the bellhops for the NVA.
Yeah.
And so they airlifted in a tower, an observation tower, like you'd see Robin Hill Tower, only maybe half the size.
Okay.
And right into the middle of the rice paddy. And there'd be a sniper up there, and we'd secure the area around him at night.
Yeah.
And he'd be up there with a starlight scope, making sure no sampans were getting it across the river, across the Saigon. And the next morning, of course, the kids would be around. They knew we were going to get up and have breakfast with sea rations, and we'd always give them sea rations. All at once, we heard a GI holler, grenade, and one of the kids had taken a grenade off the pack and thrown it in the fire. We were burning our sea ration boxes, you know, and thrown it in the fire. But that's the only time I saw any problem with the kids.
Yeah.
Other than I'm sure they were informing.
Sure. Were there, I mean, for instance, at where the battalion was stationed, would there be people, I mean, on one hand, people are firing mortars at you. On the other hand, were people coming up and trying to sell
trying to get
things and
through?
stuff like
Oh,
that?
oh.
No, I mean, just, you know, like,
No, civilians.
Looking for the dollar.
No, they weren't allowed in, and I think
Okay.
that was because, you know, in the larger division headquarters, brigade headquarters, perhaps Dow 10 and like they had billets. I mean, they had actual roofs over their heads, not sandbags, and they used that tube, the culvert tube, top of it, and then they used ammo boxes wherever needed for the bunkers. Remember, the other side of this area was South Vietnamese Army. They wouldn't let the civilians in.
right, yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't have either. I mean,
Yeah.
it'd be a definite security breach. Of course, in these more rear areas, they had hooch girls to clean. You know, they had the guys to polish polish their boots, to do a lot of their jobs. Actually, I found out later. You know.
How long were you stationed at this, this, you know, where you were with the...
With the
what's-
1st Infantry
Yeah.
Division, I started with them middle June, and I left middle April because Nixon pulled them home.
Okay.
It was a redeployment.
But they did not, but you did not get full
No,
time.
no, no. Anyone who had any significant time left at all, and I still had another 5 months, I
Yeah.
guess. Does that figure out? 6-4.
3 months.
No, 3 months
Yeah.
left. That they just get redeployed. So I went further down south with another unit, the 199th Light Infantry Brigade, and did basically the same sort of insertions. It was more searching and ambushing at night than actual coming in contact, although there were some hot areas there too.
When you would have a leave,
R&R,
yeah,
rest and recuperation.
yeah. I mean, what would that involve?
Well, you were offered that you could go to, and I can't think of all the places. If you were married, quite often you'd go back to Hawaii to meet your wife or family. You could go to, I think Bangkok was an option. Perhaps to
Did you ever get to Bangkok, out of curiosity?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay. Wild
Sounds like
town.
you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, very nice.
It's wild.
Yeah. No, I went to Sydney, Australia,
Okay.
and had a great time. If I'm not mistaken, it was 3 days, 4 nights.
3 days. So you would, I mean, basically at this point, a helicopter takes you.
We went to Tonsanut, and we flew again commercial down to right direct to Sydney, and that was my first hot shower in, well, 8 months.
Wow.
9 months. And I'll tell you, I really appreciated the hotel. It was an old hotel,
Yeah.
but they had a great hot water heater. Because first I showered for like 2 hours. You know, it just felt so good.
Yeah.
And then I had a bath, and then I showered some more. It was just, it's amazing what you take for granted.
How was that kind of transition out of, I mean, all of a sudden, I mean, you're in the jungle, and then all of a sudden you're
Yeah.
out in a modern city.
Yeah, it was nice. It was good. It was what you'd remembered before you left,
Yeah.
but you didn't give it a lot of. You didn't get attached to it because you knew you were headed back,
Right, yeah.
and you were thinking more about what you were going to do when you got back, because I took my R&R right as I got redeployed from the 1st down to a new unit. So I was apprehensive about going into a new unit, of course, how they operated, etc.
Did you go in, I mean, were you, what rank were you at?
E5 sergeant.
And so at that point, when would you be like in charge of a squad or?
First, of course, you start out. Most everyone starts out as a ammo bearer or machine gunner assistant,
Yeah.
if you will. And then I was fortunate. I became the platoon leader's radio operator, which was nice because it gives you a little idea of more of what's going on in the operation, what the communication is between command and your level.
I guess one of the, especially being a radio operator, calling in airstrikes maybe in the dark and stuff.
It's all different today.
It is, because they've got lasers and,
Yeah.
I mean, they can basically, put a pointer
Yeah.
at where you want to go. I mean, this had to be really tricky. I mean, for instance, earlier you were talking about these Australian.
This was a time. Fortunately, our platoon leader wasn't hurt that time. Actually, he was. We'd lost our platoon leader, and our platoon sergeant was in charge, and he was very good at calling in airstrikes, which was good because and they can also do it from overhead. You pop smoke, and they know your position, and they know how to square it off better than you. But the artillery strikes are a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Because you have to know what they're firing into. Do you want an air burst? Do you want a bunker burst? The RTO job was good. The time I got hit, though, I remember we had to switch to battalion. We had one on company level, one on battalion, and I was on battalion at the time, and I had to call in, for some support.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting anything. Of course, I'd been hit down the side.
What had happened to you when you were hit?
An RPG went off above me, and it was I got peppered with shrapnel,
Okay.
leg and back and neck, etc. And I'm trying to call in, and the handset cord has been severed by it's just
Yeah.
by shrapnel, So it was flying that day. But being an RTO was a good position. I enjoyed it. But then we lost our platoon leader, and then for attrition reasons, I had to go to squad leader.
When you finally finished up, did you go back to the United States with your buddy from Carlisle there?
We did. We went back. We flew out of Vietnam together on the same plane. We got into Oakland, and of course, all military flew standby then,
Yeah.
because the prices were ridiculous, and you had first option if you were in uniform. So we thought we were going to get split because there was one left, and I says, "Ralph, go ahead. I'm fine here." And then they're just closing the door, and the stewardess came out and says, "There's one more." So we both flew back together.
Yeah.
Too. Now back in country for a 2 or 3 week leave, and then I was assigned down to Fort Hood, Texas, with the 1st Armored Division to work on APCs, and Ralph went to Fort Riley, Kansas, and then did maneuvers, etc., training maneuvers over in Germany. Now we both got out the same day.
What a story. And you're still
good
friends.
friends, very
and
good friends.
I guess in the future you're possibly talking about sometime maybe taking a trip back there.
Well, I mentioned it to Ralph, and
Yeah.
Ralph said, "Well, if you're going, I guess I got to go too."
Yeah. Well,
Gotta stay together.
I think it's a great idea, and I thank you for all your service, and what a bunch of incredible stories
Well,
and
I
stuff.
appreciate you having me here today.
Oh, well, we're very fortunate to have you, and I hope to sometime get some footage from maybe your return to Vietnam. Thank you very much for joining us. That's a history show, and thank you to Dave McAllister.